A new report about voting oversight suggests that election administration throughout the country is partisan to the point that Republicans and Democrats are prioritizing their power through electoral codes. The report was released by ASU's Center for an Independent and Sustainable Democracy and Open Primaries, a national election reform organization. Joining us now, Thom Reilly. Thom Reilly is the co-director of the Center for an Independent and Sustainable Democracy, and Jeremy Gruber, the senior vice president at Open Primaries. Gentlemen, good to have you both here. Thank you so much for joining us. Thom, we'll start with you. This is a report, Election Administration in America, Partisan by Design. Tell us more.
Well, looking at election codes can be, in most people's eyes, pretty dry. But, our election administration system has been partisan for a long period of time. And that seemed to have worked when there was true competition in states, when we didn't have a majority running the entire state. That worked when most of the actors, like Secretary of States, acted in a nonpartisan manner. And it worked when most individuals were either Republicans or Democrats. But we're seeing the problem with that. Right now, we see increased polarization. Right? We see that a growing number of individuals are not part of the partisan Republican or Democrat. And that's creating some really vulnerabilities in the election administration system. In our review, we looked at the various codes that were governing it and found out that the majority of states prohibit non-affiliated or independents from serving as canvassers, from poll workers, from judges, and rely just on the two parties.
Interesting. And again, this is a survey of over 30 states or 30 some odd states around the country. What did you find?
We looked at 30 states, and the reason why we really took on this report is because we know independents are second-class citizens in our primary election system. They can't vote in the presidential preference election in Arizona, for example. So we wanted to see how are they treated in other aspects of the electoral code. And as we poured through them, we were really shocked because we were expecting to find sort of a dry recitation of rules for how our elections work. But at every turn, at every point in the electoral code of the 30 states we looked at, including Arizona, we found independents treated as second-class citizens. They can't serve or are discriminated against in serving on election boards, as election judges, as poll workers. The parties are privileged in getting voter registration data and how voter registration cards are done. At every aspect of the public's interaction with administration of our election system, independents and anyone other than a registered Democrat or Republican are shut out of the system. And we're the only country that does that. The only country in the Western world that doesn't have an independent, nonpartisan election authority.
Well, and with that in mind, Thom, the report reads no firewall between electoral competitors and electoral administrators. And that raises a big red flag, does it not?
It does. When we've talked about Secretary of States, they've kind of run under the radar, right? Until recently, when we have many individuals who are running in very polarized race, running as election deniers. So they run in these very polarized elections. And then after he or she wins, there should be this viewed as this neutral arbiter of election information. So that's kind of one component of this polarization. But, as we see now this exploitation of this, the vulnerabilities around this partisan manner is that we now have extreme groups attempting to put poll workers in the voting booth that have extreme positions that could either sabotage or create havoc in it. And in our review, keep in mind, almost all the states that we had prohibit independents or nonpartisans from even serving in that role.
With that in mind, though, and again, obviously there are extremes on both sides, I would imagine, but there certainly are extremes, as Thom mentioned. But is it inherently and necessarily unfair to not have independents, but to have Republicans and Democrats who are beholden to the election process?
Well, you have a system that's constructed bipartisan by design. That's the name of our report. It's not just partisan by design, it's partisan in the way that everybody interacts, every voter interacts with the system. That worked for a period of time when everyone was a registered Democrat or Republican. As far back as the 1960s, that was the case. But independents are now the largest or second largest group of voters in almost every state. And that's having profound implications for a system that was designed without them in mind.
How do you include them and also get the random Republican and the random Democrat?
Well, we simply need a system that's more fair, and we need to start by making sure that the people that are taking on these roles are professionals, that they follow a strict code of ethics. But we have to begin rolling back the system that we have had, a system that is currently breaking down because it includes far, far fewer people, and make sure that we build up a system that is representative of every American.
Well, and with that in mind, Thom, one of the recommendations here that nonpartisan status needs to be had here for each state chief election officer, talking, Secretary of State, county recorders, these sorts of things, nonpartisan status. I mean, can you be a Republican or a Democrat and have nonpartisan status?
Well, I think that if we go back to the election, individuals, we're the only country in the world that elects our chief election officer. But these individuals can, be a Republican or Democrat, but they should run as nonpartisan and pledge to be nonpartisan. And I think that's kind of the point, that in the past, when individuals have held these positions, they've acted in a nonpartisan manner. We haven't had just individuals that up front are running in these very polarized, running as election deniers, and professing to bring individuals that will mess with the system. And it would seem like you would want nonpartisans, at least part of the mix, equal to Republicans and Democrats, if not dominating poll workers and canvassers.
And Jeremy, last question here. Does this mean maybe as opposed to individuals, you look at nonpartisan commissions, nonpartisan government agencies, these sorts of things? I mean, you're going to get your random partisan in there, but if it's a commission, is that down the right track as far as you see?
We need nonpartisan institutions throughout our election system. We are at a point right now where more and more Americans are distrustful of the system. Some of that is valid and some of it is misplaced. But when you have partisanship run amok in this country and you have a system of elections based on partisanship, it's really not hard to imagine why people are so confused about whether or not the system is actually being fair. We need a system that people can trust. That's an impartial, a nonpartisan system. That's how every other country does it. And we need to start working towards that goal.
Well, it's an interesting study. Jeremy Gruber and Thom Reilly. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Good stuff.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.